Lab Report 11 for the Choose Your Own Adventure Lab, and I chose projectile motion, and I'm in section M6. For projectile motion, we have the problem, which is, well, what I wanted to show in BPython. It's what's the physics behind projectile motion and, the motion in a projectile, and which principles are involved, and how does the mass, if you change the mass of the ball, how does that alter the time it takes for the ball to reach the floor. And the main results, which we're going to see later, are that both the momentum and energy principles are involved, and as mass increases, the time it takes for the object to reach the ground decreases, and it's very drastic. Here's my first trial. Later on there's the code shown, but here are the results. For the first trial, we had a mass of 100 kilograms, and the time it took for the ball to reach the y-axis position 0.11, which is practically the ground, was 5.48 seconds. The initial velocity I chose was one I researched for a canyon, but these stayed the same for all the trials. Here you can see that the constant was changed to 100, and here's the basic shape of the projectile motion. For the second trial, the mass was changed to 50 in the Python code, and the time it took decreased to 5.06, or basically 5.07. And the initial velocity was kept the same, and the shape is it resembles the one before, but as you can see, the height is less because the mass is less and the time is also decreased, so it becomes smaller overall. And finally, for the third trial, I changed the ball mass to 10 kilograms, which is a tenth of the first trial, and the time reduced to 3.59 seconds. And these, believe it or not, is the same scale, so you can see how much it changed and how the arrows for the force and momentum are almost invisible in this trial. Well, you can see that this was always kept constant and that the mass was the only thing changed. And here it reaches 0.5 above the ground in 3.59 seconds. And lastly, the comparisons between the three trials, so you can see it side by side. Here's where the code I used is shown. Of course it was longer, but this is basically what was inside the while loop, which is probably the most important part. And for the first trial, or we'll analyze time, it was from 5.48 seconds down to 5.06 and finally to 3.6 basically, for 150 and 10 kilogram balls. And something I didn't mention before but it's also relevant is the final speed with which the ball reached the ground, which is 43.82 meters per second, and then in the second trial 34.77, and for the final trial 17.90 meters per second. So as you can see, changing the mass changes a lot in projectile motion. This is probably logical for us because we've grown up seeing these or thinking it's logical, but it's interesting to see the numbers and to see how drastically the mass changes projectile motion. Thank you for watching, and this was my Lab 11 in projectile motion.